We are still staying with the story of the workshop organized by the Chartered Institute of Taxation of Nigeria in conjunction with the Nigeria Revenue Service on e-invoicing and the new tax law, with the theme Unlocking Business Value with an NRS e-invoicing merchant buyer solution, Objective, Compliance and Benefits. We have shared with you a paper on the theme of the workshop delivered by Mr. Mbamishon Guam, a senior tax manager, Tax Automation Department, Nigeria Revenue Service. Today, we'll be sharing with you the implementation of the NRS e-invoicing merchant buyer solution, architecture, standards, and models. Delivered by Alex Ogunshino, IT Project Manager for e-invoicing, Nigeria Revenue Service. Take a listen.
My job for this session is well cut out, basically to walk you through the process of implementing the merchant buyer solution. For many Nigerians, right, when they hear the word electronic invoicing, what comes to mind is how does it work and how does it affect their businesses? Mr. Mbami already did justice to the first section of how does it affect their businesses. I'll be focusing more on how it works. Basically, electronic invoicing has come to do just two things. One is to standardize how invoices are created within the country. Then second is to standardize the process of exchanging an invoice. To achieve this, what we did was basically to create a standard embedded in an API, in a documentation that specified what invoice creation process should look like within our country. And to come up with this, we looked at the global electronic invoicing framework, and we were able to adopt some of the key global standards and incorporate it into our own system so that invoices created in Nigeria would also be interoperable with invoices created outside. And by doing so, it means that it becomes easier for us to be able to create invoice here and exchange it digitally. So an electronic invoice is an invoice created in a structured format, which the government already specified by in Nigeria, and also created digitally and exchanged digitally. So we need to take note of those points, right? So electronic invoice is not the normal PDF that we can go online to create. It's not what we see on our Word document. It is an invoice created in a structured format, digitally, and also exchanged digitally. And because for most of our systems, what you can see on the on your right-hand side now is what operates at the back. But as a user, what we see or what we print out basic information within the document. So the standard we specified is that every invoice in Nigeria going forward must either be in XML or JSON, which is the language you are seeing on the underside of the screen. So before proceeding, I need to walk you through some essential definitions, right? So there is invoice reference number, which is part of the standard that has been created by the government. That's every invoice must have an invoice reference number. And what is an invoice reference number? It's a combination of your invoice number, which I'm sure that most of your customer system has as of today. So you have invoice number for every invoice. There is also a service ID, which is system generated. So there is invoice number, there is service ID, and there is date stamp. So if you add the three components together, that is what gives you an invoice reference number. And what this does is that every invoice created in Nigeria becomes unique. It means that even though we have trillions of invoices, every invoice can be identified uniquely. That is invoice reference number, and it must be on every invoice created. Having a PDF document does not make it an electronic invoice, right? It has to be an invoice that conforms to the standard specified by the government of Nigeria, which makes it an electronic invoice and must be created and exchanged through digital means, already specified too. Then we have another terminology here, which is the verifiable QR code. So because every invoice signed on the system becomes a digital asset that can be used as a guarantee or can be used within the money market to get fund ahead at a discounted rate. We also made it very important that invoices that has been printed out can be uniquely identified. So there is a verifiable QR code that has a cryptographic stamp identifier. I know that's a lot of grammar. So when you log into your system or when you enable your customer on their portal, there is a cryptographic key. It comes in a text file, more like a document. So that document contains two key pairs. So there is a public key and there is a private key. So it is unique to every of the taxpayer on the system. So they need to use that key to encrypt their IRN, convert it to the specified standard, and use it to generate a QR code that will be appended on the printed version of their invoice. So it means that even when an invoice record has been altered, right, the QR code remains unique and cannot be altered. So it is an extra layer of security on the printed version of the document. And it also implies that only people that have access to that key can generate an invoice on behalf of the business. Then we have electronic invoicing solution. The good thing about E-Invoicing is that for most of the big ERP solutions, they already conform to some standard within the E-Invoicing solution. So recall I said that while we were creating the standard for E-Invoicing, what we also did was to ensure that it conforms with already laid down global standard like the BIS and the Universal Business Language. So for most of these sophisticated accounting solutions, they already conform to E-Invoicing solution. So you can see every accounting solution today as an electronic invoicing solution. The only requirement is that they have to conform to the standards specified by government. And what are these standards? Is that for you to be able to create an invoice, right, you have to follow what has been specified. So instead of having to party A writing a bottle of water as bottle or as WATER as water, and the other person is writing H2O, right? There is a unique code that you can use to identify water globally, not just within Nigeria, right? So the standard is that you are expected to pass that code instead of writing water. So that is the basic foundation of electronic invoicing, and that already exists within this solution. You might still need to make some modifications to be sure that it accepts things around the invoice reference number, which is unique to Nigeria, business ID, and some other components. Then, within the invoicing framework, we have three key players. We have the supplier, we have the buyer, and we have the regulator, which is NRS, right? But within that ecosystem, we also have two key enablers, which are system integrators and access point provider. The role of a system integrator is to help taxpayers standardize their system to conform to the standards specified by government, right? For those that do not have the technical capabilities, because I mean from this conversation you can tell that it will be a bit technical to implement. You can use the service of system integrators, and we have some that has been accredited, right? So you can always work or partner with them to engage your taxpayer, because the reality is that our goal is to ensure that there is a risk-free implementation where businesses are able to integrate directly to the system without any issue relating to data integrity or compromise, right? So we encourage tax professionals to work with system integrators and help your customer to integrate to the system. So that is the role of a system integrator. Then for the system integrator bit, it is optional for large enterprises that have full-blown technology team. They can go ahead to implement themselves. But for others with lean or no technology team, they can engage the system integrator. The other way is access point provider. These people are responsible for helping you to exchange your invoices from one party to the other. Like I mentioned, 3 key parties. There is the government, there is the buyer. Access point provider plays a bi-directional role. So they help you send invoices out and they also help you receive invoices. For this, it is mandatory that every business connects to an access point provider because their scope is not limited within the country alone, right? Mr. Mbami mentioned PEPO during his presentation. And some of our access point provider here in Nigeria are also registered with PEPO. PEPO is Pan-European Public Procurement Online. It's a group of countries that have come together to specify standard on how invoices should be exchanged across the world, which luckily for us, Nigeria is also a member. So it means that access point provider accredited by PEPO and in Nigeria would be able to help you exchange those invoices from within Nigeria to other member countries within the PEPO network. So we have the simplified tax invoice, which we basically know as the B2C invoice, right? A business to customer. Is an invoice issued by a business to a final consumer. So you've gone to a retail store to buy a bottle of water. You are expected to receive a receipt, which is what we call the B2C invoice in this case, right? It must also be an electronic invoice. It means that the supplier name must be there. There must be an invoice reference number. There must be a QR code, and optionally, if the identifier of the consumer is also available, you can pass it, but it's optional. Otherwise, there must be a verifiable QR code on that invoice that could also be used for other value additional services, right? Then there is also a tax invoice, which is the full invoice between a business to business or a business to customer. For this kind of invoice, the customer party details and the supplier party details are mandatory. So you need to pass it within the invoice. Other components, including issue date, due date, QR code, must be within the invoice component. If you look at our schema, which we would go there shortly, you will see that there are mandatory fields, there are optional fields. So for the B2B invoice, all the mandatory fields must be completed before it can be validated and signed to be an electronic invoice. So this is what a typical B2B or B2G and B2C invoice looks like. So we've adopted the 4 to 5 corner model, which is also the global standard of invoicing, where you have the merchant sitting just at corner 1, creating the invoice using an electronic invoicing solution. And remember, this electronic invoicing solution could be the merchant's current system. The only requirement is that it must be standardized to conform to the new requirement. So see corner 1 as MTN Nigeria creating an invoice and attempting to send it to corner 5, which could be also Dangote, for example, right? So you create the invoice on your system, you sign, then you use the service of an access point provider. On corner 2, between corner 1 and corner 2, you can have a system integrator there if the capacity to standardize is not there. So you sign your invoice yourself and connect to an access point provider who then helps you to 1, report that transaction to government, then 2, exchange it with the access point provider of the other party. Let me take it again. You create an invoice as a merchant from your system and use the service of an access point provider to report and exchange with the access point provider of the other party. The other party is prepared to receive that invoice, and there is access limitation. The way the system is built is in such a way that only the 3 parties would have access to that invoice. And when an invoice is signed within the ecosystem, what happens is that that invoice leaves your system to the National Digital Registry for Invoices, where all invoices are encrypted. So it means that even when you, in an unlikely event that you have access to that database, the data you will be seeing will be hashed data. You won't be able to make sense of the data. So when transmission happens, what the participants are exchanging is just invoice reference number. So the access point at point 2 is sending IRN, that is invoice reference number, to the access point at point 4. That is the only data that is being exchanged. It is when the access point at point 4 receives that notification, then it attempts to do a lookup of that invoice. And at that point, the system would check if it is indeed the right access point of the buyer who is supposed to view that invoice and fulfill. So point 4, try to check if the invoice is available, download because the permission is there, then decrypt and extend it to the supplier at point 5 to honor and fulfill that invoice. So we've tried as much as possible to maintain the current relationship between parties in a transaction and ensure that third parties don't have access. So that is the B2G/B2B model. Then there is a business consumer model where invoices are created and given to the consumer immediately. So the difference is that the first one follows a clearance model, while the second one follows a reporting model. So it means that you can create the first invoice, you need to pass it through the system first before you can exchange. The B2C invoice, you can create and exchange and report that data near real time. So it means that if I go to a store today, even though they are issuing electronic invoices, because all the components required to generate electronic invoice today in Nigeria can be done offline. So you don't need to rely on internet. So if you go to a store today, they are able to generate that invoice and issue it to you while they report those transactions later. So that is the major difference between the B2B and the B2C invoice. So for the core component driving the MBS ecosystem, it's a large ecosystem, not only driven by FRS, but we have other government agencies also involved in the process, right? So one thing we've done is to adopt a technical standard of using only RESTful API to do system-to-system communication. So it means that we are not coming to deploy solutions or ERP for your customers, right? We are only specifying standard using API that they can conform to and communicate to us through the available channels that we've provided. Then there is a data standard that I already spoke about. In this slide, you would see UPL, you see PEPO, BIS. These are all the global invoicing standard that we've reviewed and conformed to before we are able to design a standard for Nigeria today. Then we also have a very robust legal and compliance framework, particularly big on data privacy and retention policy. From all of our service providers, they are required to go through proper screening with NIDA, who regulates technology in the country. And if you look at the logo at the footer, you will see the UBL, You will see NIDA there. You will also see conformity with ISO 27001, which has to do with information security. It's a global standard. There is also ISO 222 for financial reporting. Then there is also the international code designator, who has designated 0244 as our international code in the country. So it means that our identity within the invoice schema can also be recognized outside the country. Then on security and compliance, I think I've spoken about this. Data within our system is encrypted using AES-256 standard. There is also a high level of cryptography protocol within the system that ensures that only people that has access to the right key are able to access the system. Transmission, like I explained, is also very secure. It's just exchanging IRN that only the party within that transaction is able to access the information within the invoice. We also adopted digital certificates that you would use to sign an invoice before it can be recognized on our end. Then there is also an audit trail of all transactions done on the system. Once an invoice is signed, the record remains there. It can't be altered. You can only raise additional documents to correct the invoice in case there is an error. On how to onboard, it is very straightforward. So you either onboard through Tax Pro Max or you onboard through the E-Invoicing system. The major difference is that on Tax Pro Max, your information already exists, right? So you are just clicking on enablement and submitting, because from your bio data, we can pull all the required information. On the FRS, on the E-Invoicing system, you would need to manually fill in those information for us, right? And click enablement. We would run through this during the practical session. For lessons and best practice, like you learned during the last session, we started in 2024, and with experience so far, it's important for you to advise your clients to start early, because integration could be very tedious. There has to be synergy, not just within the tax department. There has to be synergy between tax, technology, even management sometimes, right? Before you can successfully integrate to the system. It's also advisable that you engage certified service provider so that you can have a risk-free implementation, because it is their domain, and they are readily available to provide that support to your customer. Like I advise, it's important to partner with them. Then there is a need for robust data hygiene. It means that some of the components required within the electronic invoice might not be available within your customer system. So for example, it is expected that you add the customer's state and local government to every invoice you are creating. So if that data is not available, there is a need for you to work with your customer to do an updated KYC where they can retrieve those information. Then investment in training, which is what we are having today. It is also very important that we try to advance because, like I mentioned, e-invoicing is a new global wave in terms of financial transaction, and it's not only happening in Nigeria. It is happening everywhere else. So investing in that training is important, and we thank CITN for giving us this opportunity.
Now to the question and answer session.
Where you have a customer, a supplier for instance, and you're looking at your VAT tracking, and it's not on the e-invoicing platform, how do you recover when it's time to do your reconciliation?
I just wanted clarifications on, I saw debit note and credit notes. So I just wanted to know if it's for tax purposes or for record purposes, because I know debit note and credit note are linked to premium, which are not taxable.
So we have some clients that they have to usually invoice on the particular customer portal. How do they record that? For example, now when you work with airline, you have to issue that invoice from their own portal, not from your own portal.
My concern is regarding the industries. I think we have complained about that before. Maritime, we are not listed as part of the industries. I don't know if that can be incorporated. Even the sub-industries, we don't see that. Thank you.
So my first question is that for a multinational company that exists in Nigeria and other countries that also have e-invoicing, would they need to come to FRS as a service provider?
Would they need to come to NRS?
Thank you. As a service provider, if they are about to do the API in-house, rather than outsourcing it for any invoicing developer? That's the first question. So second question is that why is the invoicing channeled at companies individual at first rather than the government agency itself, looking the likes of customs? So if I'm paying the custom agency and I'm not getting an invoice from what I'm getting, and now the FI is coming to me that, okay, you need to be onboarded as an invoice. So I think we need to do the homework from the government itself rather than flogging the individual company as a whole.
My question goes to invoices that are reimbursable costs. So how does this address that? Then number two, relating to mini-mart and malls that we are their customers and they send out invoices, but we just go there to get things. We are less concerned about receiving any invoice. So I just want to understand the perspective to that too.
We have been having feedback from our clients, and the concern is the cost of compliance, engaging these system integrators and access points. These customers are saying that the cost of compliance is not going to add value to them. It's not going to bring any further sales to them. Why are they incurring this cost? And it's a big concern. Also, my second question is, the taxpayer that are below the benchmark, are they still going ahead to do e-invoicing?
In regards the e-invoicing system, what will be the solution between an informal customer transacting a business with a formal or large taxpayer? Take for example, you have a feed meal processing company, and their major raw materials are maize and other items, and the customers they dealt with here are informal customers in the villages. So in such a system, how are we going to solve the problem of e-invoicing?
What is the implication of using a default API on NRI system to using a system integrator? Is it a must to use access provider? The second question, a client has a customer overseas, a non-resident customer, and they need to send an invoice based on the trial they've had together. The client is not having a TIN number, which is based in UK. So how will this be treated on NRS e-invoicing platform? Thank you.
My question is around what happens with transactionary VAT on little, maybe financial transactions. How does the e-invoicing apply for transactionary transactions where you charge VAT?
I want to understand that as a business and understanding the opportunities in the VAT, the e-invoicing, knowing that there are a lot of persons that are not yet even aware of this, how do I get to engage them and bring them on board? And what are there conditions and things to do this? Because most of the people that have spoken are talking to us as the final users. So I want to see that, I want to take this out as a business and onboard people on the platform. So what is the process and what does it entail?
I want to know, where does company without operational ERP stands on e-invoicing?
I just want to know two things. One, currently we have TIN and we have a tax ID. Which do we actually display on our invoice? Two, and in my company recently we were trying to file for our VAT, do our VAT return, and we observed that the current process entails that we include our customers' TIN. And these days, okay, we usually deal with working clients, individuals on the street. They don't have TIN. How do I go about that?
I have a client that is in education, is a registered trustee, is in education. I want to know that for the e-invoicing, he only have students that he pays advert out, he pay money to the account, and he recognizes it as his revenue. How does this e-invoice relate to him? Or I'm trying to understand how it relates to education sector, a college, an institution like that.
The question is about who bears the cost of this e-invoices, because we have two parties that we like to pay. We have system integrator. We know that taxpayer bear the cost, and we also have APP. And the APP team I have discussed with, they are divided. One group is saying that they are not going to collect money that is free. Another group is saying that they are going to charge monthly. So now we don't even know which one to go for to sign a contract with, so that we don't have any unplanned costs in the future. So can the team advise us who bear the cost, integrator paid by taxpayer, who bear that of APP?
My question is, how does this e-invoicing relates to the government transaction?
For question number one regarding non-registration on the e-invoicing, or if you have a buyer that is not on the e-invoicing environment. Currently, what we are focusing on as NRS is your outbound invoices. That is invoices that you issue to your buyers or to your customers. And whether the customer is available on the e-invoicing system, MBS system or not, as long as you have their RC and you have their TIN or their tax ID, once you process that invoice will be captured on the MBS system. Whenever that segment of taxpayers are onboarded to the e-invoicing environment, whatever documents or invoices have been issued in their name would be replicated to their account. That's why currently we are focusing on the large taxpayers, because we know it's easy to get compliance from them. They will cascade down. The e-invoicing cycle or the e-invoicing environment will be completed when all other segments of the economy are onboarded. So for now, focus on issuance. Whether the person is on the e-invoicing environment or not, that is not an issue as long as you have reported the invoice. Because first and foremost, we want to know what you are doing, because you are the one issuing the invoice. Have you complied? Can we be able to tell the quantum of business that you have done first? Then the second leg is the person that the invoice was issued to. Has he also received it? Has he also been onboarded? And whenever he onboards at that point in time, whatever transactions has been reported in his name will be replicated to his account. So if you as a large taxpayer and your customers have been onboarded already, that cycle will be completed immediately. As you're issuing, your customer is also getting that invoice in his e-invoicing environment. And there, the process of acceptance or rejection and the process of payment tracking will follow. So that's how it works there.
On the question relating to debit note and credit note, so it serves both purpose, both tax purpose and also correcting the previous document. What you need to do is to specify the invoice type code, either credit or debit, and is able to make adjustment to the previous document which you've created, duly taxable or not taxable. The credit note is able to neutralize that. Just specify the document and the other values that you want to make adjustment to. So it comes in as negative and is able to neutralize the error in the previous document.
I think he was asking from accounting perspective. The e-invoicing environment actually incorporates that also in the issue of payment. For the debit note or the credit note, also when you come to payment validation, because on the e-invoicing system, we also track payment status. And at payment status, we'll track to see what is the amount that was paid for this invoice. If the net invoice is 1 million, then the payment status, if we track it, how much was the inflow? Let's say if the inflow is 80 naira, the remaining balance, is it an arrears or outstanding, or they use their credit note to clear it? So the credit note and the debit note serve both for correction of the primary invoice that was issued and also correcting or validating payments where credit notes were used to clear the payment. That's just in addition to what Alex has said. Then for the central billing system, particularly we see that in airline and some other businesses where they have a central billing system that most people come on board to invoice their customers. Even in that, each of those invoices emanating from that central billing system carries the name of the issuer, not the name of the company that's providing that central billing system. So like in aviation, when you are going, I don't want to call names, when you are buying tickets, actually there's a central billing system where the invoices are generated. But when the invoice finally comes out, it comes out with the name of the airline that issued that invoice. So the company or the consultant or the product that is generating that central billing system, some of them are global billing system. They are not even in Nigeria. They are expected to comply with the Nigerian e-invoicing standard. So the invoices emanating from that central billing system also comply with Nigerian requirements. That's the little I can say about that. Then question 4 regarding maritime industry. Maritime is there. If you go to the ISIC, you have transport and logistics. So technically, when we look at maritime, it's a broader word. It's a broader word. Within that maritime, you find transporters there, you find clearing and forwarding, you find a lot. So most of the things that maritime does that relates to particularly movement of goods and services is found under transportation and haulage in the ISIC code. Then if you're regarding maritime as to those ones in fishing, that is deep maritime exercises, you also find them in that sector where they are. That is deep sea fishing and other things that they do within the maritime ecosystem. So the ISIC code is a robust code that if you don't understand, just go online, you can see the breakdown to the smallest businesses that are being done and familiarize yourself with it. And that's why on the e-invoicing system, we made a search button where you can give the generic word of the sector where you operate, and the system will give you where they fall into. There are some business sectors that fall in multiple segments or classification lines on the ISIC code. That's why you are expected to know what precisely you do. Like in education, on the ISIC they fall under professional, they also fall under education. So you need to know the kind of education that you're into. When you go to the one that is education, you see primary education, you see secondary education, you see tertiary education. When you go to that one that is into professional, you see consulting that is there. So you should be able to know that, because the classification will enable the system to know how to handle your financial affairs as regards to tax and also fiscal planning. If you are running higher education and you go to professional service, whenever they are doing fiscal planning, they won't see you within the education sector. They will see you under professional service, and thereby you might be reporting or classifying your business wrongly. And question 5, Alex will handle that.
Just to buttress the question on maritime, because he mentioned that he has mentioned this in another forum. So you can go to the website now and search for water. You would see a drop down of options from the subset industry. So select the most appropriate or best fit, and the other section would be populated. So it's actually under transportation and storage, section H in the ISIC revision 4 document. Industry, transportation and storage, sub-industry, water transportation. And you'll be able to select the appropriate industry. On the next question on multinationals, so we do encourage our taxpayers with that capability to implement themselves. But what we've discovered is that there is still a bit of gap, even if e-invoicing has been implemented in their head office. The gap still exists, and which could lead to a very risky implementation, right? So you don't need to come and apply for license if you're a multinational with a very solid technical team to implement e-invoicing. But what would advise is you work with any of our service provider as consultant, as QA consultant, to review your implementation and ensure that there are no risks at all, because we've identified a couple of such implementation that there's a need for them to review what they've done. So it's advisable you work with approved service provider who has the necessary local context, and because their evaluation process is also very tedious, they've gone through this process multiple times just to ensure that they tick all the boxes. So engage service provider as QA consultant to review your work. You don't need to come for service provider license as a multinational.
The question 6 is regarding government and government agencies. If you had looked at the presentation made by Alex, in the e-invoicing we have the B2C, we have the B2B, then we have the B2G, or the G to B and G to C. Because we have also government enterprises that also are for profits. They also issue invoices. I don't want to name them, but government also do business. So beginning with the government to customer invoices, we also have the phase where we implement the government to customer, because government to customer is quite easy to implement, because whatever we do as NRS, it's actually on behalf of the government. So each of the MDS and GOEs, that is government operated businesses, would actually come under e-invoicing. And as we know, the NTA expanded the scope of NRS as to what NRS will do going forward. And if you look at it, you see that NRS is actually going to take over assessment and collection of government revenue, not just taxes. So it's very important to know that. So very soon, government agencies will also issue e-invoice compliant invoices for every inflow to government for accountability, which you can verify and also confirm. And those invoices are regarded on the e-invoicing ecosystem as government to business or government to customer. So our focus now is on the large taxpayer business segment, and that's how we continue the implementation until the whole ecosystem is covered. So be rest assured, government invoices would also comply to the e-invoicing environment. Then the question on reimbursable costs under e-invoicing. Prior to now, which I also need to state here, how we make our business arrangements and business combinations would have to restructure it to ensure that it complies with e-invoicing requirements. Every reimbursable that you bear, there must be an invoice to that effect. Unlike what we currently have, that you write letter. A letter is also an invoice demanding payment for whatever cost you bear on behalf of a third party. So, for every reimbursable, there must also be an invoice demanding for that payment. And that invoice must be issued to comply with the invoicing requirements. The era of just sending letters across in order to claim input or to claim expense costs or costs borne on behalf of either head office or a subsidiary, that would also come to an end. If you do so, technically you're shielding the person that is expected to bear that cost. So it's like a missing trader. The transaction is supposed to be a multiple level transaction, but one person executed it by himself. In order to get your reimbursement, an invoice must be issued to show that portion of that money does not actually belong to you, or a portion of that cost does not actually belong to you, so that that transaction can be tracked and that economic activity can be tracked. Because if you don't do so, particularly for companies that are running like agency kind of arrangements or distributorship for fast consumer moving goods, whereby the goods actually come from the manufacturer to the distributor, and the distributor is responsible for interfacing with the final customer, and he foots the bill or he sells the goods, but the bulk of that amount does not belong to the distributor. Before you can move money to the manufacturer, you must invoice it. Because if you don't do so, at the end of the financial year of the period, based on the e-invoicing reporting that you're doing, the true picture of your economic activity will be overstated, and thereby you would run into trouble for tax purposes. So it is expected that every transaction that is being done, there must be a corresponding invoice that follows with it. Not just business arrangement or contract agreements. Yes, contract agreements are there, but invoices must follow to support every business arrangement that you have entered into. That's for reimbursables. For cost of compliance, let me also state here clearly that you cannot say that e-invoicing does not add value to your business. It does. And the reason is being, for you saying that is simply because you don't know the impact or the value that e-invoicing will bring to your business. Like local purchase order finance, whereby you need money from bank to finance your business. A lot of companies today, even if they have an invoice to finance, when they approach banks based on credit rating, they will not be able to actually get the credit line to finance that invoice. E-invoicing creates that environment for credit rating and also for invoice financing to even to the lowest person that has been onboarded, because we have a single source of truth. The bank can pick that invoice and follow up to know whether that invoice is genuine or not. But where we don't have an existing e-invoicing system, banks and financial institutions become very cautious of whatever invoice is presented for financing, because you can go anywhere and generate invoice, and you can stage someone somewhere and the person will agree that yes, the invoice is correct. It is when money has already gone out, you discover that everything was pure arrangement. But with an e-invoicing system on ground, any invoice that you present to any financial institution for financing, they can actually rely on that document because they have a single source of truth where they can verify whether that invoice is authentic or not. And by that, they would be able to oblige or offer financial service to you. And also, if you issue an invoice on the e-invoicing environment and that invoice is declined, or there is record of non-payment of that invoice, we can also use the e-invoicing system to do credit rating to show that you know they pay according to Nigerians. So it simply means that whenever you go to anyone to get goods and services, they will not oblige you. They will say your credit rating is low, as is obtainable in other countries globally. So as for cost of compliance, there are two. You can do self-implementation if you so wish. And for the uptake now, particularly for the large taxpayers, as I earlier stated, NRS and any other stakeholder, we are regulators. The e-invoicing ecosystem, it is an open system where it gives room for competition. I think we saw an example of competition today when the service providers came and they were making presentation of what they can do. Are we together? As the deployment and adoption gets on the way, many companies, many service providers will come, and the cost of implementation will definitely drop. It's also possible that at the end of it, you might not even pay anything. But for now, that is the early adoption. For those people who are sinking their resources to actually get businesses on board, definitely there will be costs also to the subscribers or to the businesses. As to NRS, as to government, government is also paying for the data being transmitted, is also investing for the data centers that are being built where this record or data will be stored. So government is also heavily investing to ensure that we can be able to accommodate the quantum of invoices that will come from Nigerian businesses. So it's a win-win. The initial cost is always there, but there won't be subsequent costs of adoption of the e-invoicing system. I'd also deal with the issue of benchmark. There's always benchmark. Even in account opening at bank, there are thresholds because there are transactions that you can actually not capture if the benchmark means the least trader in the market. But if the benchmark means that you are a big company, however, your margin is very minimal, that is, you are running in kobos and in few nairas, that does not exempt you from reporting. I'll give you an example with banks today. Banks literally earn in kobos and in nairas from the services they provide to their customers. that does not mean that they are not going to report those transactions. Each transaction must be distinctly reported, even if it is 1 kobo. So, if your invoice is reading 1 kobo to your customer, issue an e-invoice for 1 kobo to that customer in his name. You are not expected to aggregate until it becomes 1 billion. Then you report it as 1. No. For each kobo you are earning, you are expected to report it as a distinct invoice. So if benchmark is regarding the value of the transaction, there's no benchmark for value of a particular transaction, but there's benchmark for a business. That's why we're starting with 5 billion and above. We'll cascade down until we get to the least person on the queue. And that also addresses the issue of informal sector. Technically, we talk about informal sector, it's because we don't have your record, your tax record. But with the new tax reform, every taxable person, every individual is also expected to obtain a tax ID. And I know that will bring about formalization of businesses. Informal sector, as we talked about it today, is just because we don't have your record. Now that it has become mandatory for everyone to obtain a tax ID, informal sector will now be formal sector, meaning we know you. We know you. Whenever we don't know you, we regard you informal. But once we know you, you're no longer informal again. You have now become a formal entity or personality, and we can track you to the remotest village as to what you do. So, with e-invoicing and with the implementation of the tax reform and the respective tax acts that came out of it, the informal sectors will largely be formalized. So wherever you go and whosoever you transact with, definitely you'll be able to get their tax ID and their necessary information for tax purposes.
Just to also add to the informal sector conversation. So starting with the large taxpayer was deliberate because we also wanted to use the top to bottom approach to be able to drive adoption. And I must say that we started seeing results because even some of the large taxpayer that has implemented e-invoicing have started requesting their customer that they would only accept electronic invoicing, right? So to the scenario of a customer supplying maize, what they just need to do is to redirect their efforts, right? I'm sure that today they probably come to your vendor portal to upload those invoices. Another thing you could do is to standardize that vendor portal so that when they're creating those invoices, it becomes electronic invoice. If it's a case that today they give you a paper receipt, they need to redirect that effort of going to print receipts to engaging some of our service providers here who already have portals that could help them generate those invoices in minutes. On default API, there are limitations to the use of default API. You can use the default API to receive invoice, download the invoice, also for reporting, but you can't use it to transmit invoices. So it means that you still need to connect to any of our service providers to be able to exchange those invoices with the buyer on the other side. But with default, you can report, you can receive invoices, you can download, but you can't transmit with it. Then for non-residents, so non-residents are not excluded from e-invoicing. What we've recommended is that if you have a non-resident customer that does not earn any profit in Nigeria, you can go ahead to adopt their national ID in place of TIN that you are supposed to pass within the invoice schema or standard. But in a case that this non-resident customer earn profit or does business in the country, in line with the new law, Nigeria Tax Act, you are required to advise them to obtain a tax ID.
I've already answered the issue of transactional VAT. For if it is a small amount, as small as 1 kobo, you are expected to issue an invoice for that. Then how to engage and onboard users. While one thing is, Alex would have handled that, but I think your question was regarding getting businesses, isn't it, to actually comply. One of those things that is required is what we are doing now. When we started with the large taxpayers, we started engaging with the taxpayers themselves before coming even to the consultants or coming to the service providers, either system integrators or access point providers. So also we'll do voluntarily. Then we'll come with the final one where it becomes mandatory for you to onboard. At that time, you don't need anyone to tell you, because there will be sanction for what? Non-compliance. But for now, we'll continue creating this awareness to professionals, professional bodies, to business segments and business sectors until they get the message. And once that happens, for those that will voluntarily comply, fine, there won't be any issue. But we know in every era, there are some that voluntary compliance is not in their dictionary. Then we go to what? Enforcement of what? Compulsory compliance. So for now, continue creating the niche within your own space. If you are a company that wants to get into this ecosystem, start creating your awareness, create a niche for yourself, identify the market, and solve the problem of the market, because that needs market survey, market research, market development. If you understand it, fine, because the e-invoicing ecosystem is so wide and it goes to the best solution provider, because technically as we speak now, there is a problem out there. And what's the problem? Companies need to comply with what? E-invoicing requirement as provided for in section 158 of the NTA. So what opportunity can you seize to solve that problem? It's up to you to come up with the ideas to see how you can canvas and solve that problem. Then companies without ERP, that's also a niche. I believe we have the caliber of people that we have here are professionals, are tax professionals who are there to solve problems. So if your company does not have an ERP, what can you do as a tax manager? What can you do as an IT company to bridge that gap? Because they are expected to comply, because it's already in the law. So think about it, and I'm very sure most of our sponsors today that they came here to present things, I could see light at the end of the tunnel, but I know it can get better. For the fact that a company does not have an ERP, that does not mean that they will not be able to comply with what? E-invoicing mandate. Then TIN and tax ID. I'll just make a brief comment about that. And I'll make it in such a way that I'll drive it home for you to understand the distinction between TIN and tax ID. And I'll go to the banking system. Currently, you cannot run a banking account or open an account until you have a BVN. Am I right? But you cannot use your BVN to deposit money in any bank. Am I right? The BVN identifies you as a bank, as an individual or company that banking services can be extended to, isn't it? However, when you want to now finally engage in banking services, each of the banks would give you a unique account that will be linked to your BVN, so that any transaction from that bank, I don't want to be calling bank's name, any transaction that you handle with bank A will be reported or will be linked to the BVN, showing that you have account in bank A. In the NTAA, every tax authority was given right to issue tax ID. And in Nigeria, our tax system is fragmented. Am I right? Meaning, we have the national and the subnational. In fact, at the subnational, we have 2 tiers, the states and the local governments. And the NTAA says each of these tax authorities can issue tax ID. The tax ID is the central ID that will be used to track your activities across all tax authorities. So if we want to know your tax compliance across all tax authorities, we'll pick your tax ID, we run it, and we see your transaction in Lagos, in Sokoto, in Zamfara, and in Rivers State. But if we want to know your compliance in Lagos, it is your team in Lagos that will tell us what you are doing in Lagos. The era whereby when you obtain team in Lagos and you avoid your tax obligation in other tax levels has passed, because the tax ID will expose you whether you are complying in Lagos, because we have some that they'll say, when they go to Abuja and they approach them, they'll say, I am in Lagos. And in recent, they are not also complying in Lagos. So that loophole is what the tax ID will close. We have seen instances whereby, let's say, lately, I think, late last year, we had a mild drama where one of the subnational tax authorities charged an individual to court for tax avoidance. And they gave the individual about 600 million as the tax liability. The individual went to court and provided tax clearance from another state that he has been complying from that state to, and we don't have a single source of truth to check if actually the document is presenting reflects the true position of his disclosure of income and payment of taxes. But if the tax ID were to be available, all that the court of law needs to do is to pick up his tax ID, run it. This paper you're presenting, have you actually declared that revenue in that jurisdiction A or B? And from there, that problem will be solved. So in 2026, even as we're seated here, everyone that has a national identity number, technically you have a tax ID. Any company that has an RC or BN from the CAC also has tax ID as we speak now. So the thing that is being issued is like your personal account with that tax authority. However, it is linked so that whatever you do, it is accounted for at every point in time. I think I have clarified the distinction between the two. Then for VAT filing, for companies that don't have tax ID or they don't have TIN, it is advised that whosoever doesn't have tax ID or TIN, while you comply with your VAT obligation, you impute 0 there. Because that gives you the opportunity to come and update it at any point in time that the customer provides his tax ID or his TIN. The essence is both tax ID and TIN are valid. Let's say if you come to any transaction with NRS, if we apply your tax ID on NRS system, you validate you based on the TIN that NRS has issued to you. And if you take that tax ID to Lagos Internal Revenue Service. Once they key in that tax ID on their system, because we're running fragmented systems, it's not a central system. Every tax authority have their own system. However, within that ecosystem, your tax ID is also linked there. So if you're rendering your payee returns on Lagos Internal Revenue Service system, if they enter your tax ID there, it will validate automatically because they have your records in their system. So both ways, it will suffice. Then for online integration with Tax Pro, there's distinction between the tax administration system and the e-invoicing system. Just as I stated, in Nigeria we run a fragmented tax administration system, meaning every tax authority has a right to deploy their own proprietary technology to administer their taxes. So that's why an e-invoicing does not belong to NRS alone. E-invoicing, just like the tax ID, just like BVN, belongs to the country. All of the tax authorities can actually plug into e-invoicing to get data. So, the tax administration system cannot subsume the e-invoicing system. The e-invoicing system is a standalone system for a single source of truth for economic activity in Nigeria. That's why we can only allow you to enable your e-invoicing from the tax admin system. That is linking the tax admin to the e-invoicing. But when you come to processing your invoice, you cannot come and be processing your invoice on Tax Pro now. You process your invoice on the e-invoicing system. Then the e-invoicing system will now feed the tax admin system with your activities. For payroll transactions, it goes to the relevant state where you are domiciled. For income, either company income or VAT transactions, it's going to populate the Tax Pro or the tax admin system for the collection of VAT or company income tax. So the e-invoicing is the central machine for feeding all other agencies, all other tax administration authorities in Nigeria. So it's bigger than any single tax admin system.
So on the cost of integration, we've also received multiple feedbacks from our esteemed taxpayers, and that has been forwarded to the management team and is currently under review. But let me just state clearly that access point providers are at liberty to charge for the service they render. Only reporting of invoices is free. Exchange of invoice between a supplier and a buyer comes at a cost to them because they've also invested to get to this point. The cost may vary depending on the cost of development and the business model, but they are at liberty to charge. But the feedback on high cost of implementation is under review. Then quickly, for the person that asked about selecting default APP on Tax Pro Max, and they are still required to change their access point provider. So it's because of the limitation of the default APP. To be able to exchange invoices, you need to select any of our accredited access point provider. Remember that exchange of invoices is not limited to Nigeria alone. It could be cross-border. The MBS defaults will not give you that. Then support during implementation will not also come with MBS defaults. So you are encouraged to select any of our access point provider as your APP. Thank you.
There you are, electronic invoicing. We do hope you're well informed on what electronic invoicing is all about and will do well to comply. Thank you for watching.